All right, folks, welcome to our last math lecture. This is going over time and temperature conversions, so talking about 12-hour time and 24-hour time, Celsius and Fahrenheit, why do we need to know these, etc. We'll start with 24-hour time. Why do we even care about 24-hour time? What does it matter? Can we all call it 3 p.m. and be good? With 24-hour time, obviously there are 24 hours in a day, and 24-hour time eliminates confusion around AM or PM. If I tell you something happened at 8, did it happen at 8 AM or at 8 PM? So for example, let's say patient Smith needs to get his medication at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening, and you walk into Mr. Smith's room and check his chart, and all his chart says is that he got his meds at 7. Well, do you know if he got his meds at 7 a.m. or at 7 p.m.? Do you need to go hunt somebody down and check with them? If you give him his meds now, will he have overdosed on his medication? So using 24-hour time allows us to distinguish between that 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. This is the opening line to the book 1984. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Showing usage of that 24-hour time. So how do we turn 12-hour time into 24-hour time? It's pretty simple. After 12 p.m., after noon, you're going to add 12 to your hour. So starting at 1 p.m., instead of 1 p.m., 1 p.m. becomes 1300 because it's the 13th hour in the day. 2 p.m. will become 1400, etc. This then eliminates any need for an AM or PM because you know if your hour is 13 or greater, then it's afternoon. We're in the afternoon or the evening. So you can see in the chart here on the right, when we hit 12 p.m., we roll over to 1300, which is 1 p.m., up until midnight, or up until 11, which is 2300, and then we get to midnight. So anything with an hour that's greater than 12, 13, 14, 15, etc., we know that this is in the afternoon or the evening. This would be PM. So there are a few key differences between 12 and 24-hour time that you should know and that I will be looking for when I'm grading your homework and your quiz. So 12-hour time might have 3 numbers, it might have 4, right? We can write 12:45 p.m., we can write 11:15 a.m., depends on what time it is. It will always have a colon in between the hours and the minutes. So we should always write 5:30 with a colon in between your hours and your minutes. You would never write it 5:30 like that. And it should always have AM or PM. Again, back to Mr. Smith. If he gets his meds at 7 o'clock, did he get them at 7 p.m. last night? Did he get them at 7 a.m. this morning? We don't know, just looking at that. Now, 12-hour time on the other, or 24-hour time, sorry, on the other hand, should always have 4 numbers. So if it is 2:34 a.m., we would write that 0234, or we'd say 0234. You would not simply write 234. So you should always have 4 numbers in there. You should not have a colon between the hours and the minutes, though this rule is not always, this is not always a hard, fast rule. Sometimes you'll see something like 0234, but generally speaking, you should not put a colon between the hours and the minutes. And obviously, you shouldn't have any AM or PM because we don't need it in 24-hour time. If we're writing out Mr. Smith's time for his medication, and Mr. Smith got his meds at 7 a.m., we would write 0700. And because 07 is less than 13, we know that Mr. Smith got his meds at 7 a.m. If Mr. Smith got his meds at 7 p.m., we would write 1900. And because 19 is greater than 13, we know that Mr. Smith got his meds at p.m. So the a.m. and p.m. is implied in the number. So yes, I will be looking for that. Your 12-hour time should not have AM, or your 24-hour time, sorry, should not have AM or PM written in there. Let's do some examples really quick. So evening class technically would start at 5:40 p.m. How do we write that in 24-hour time? Well, we're in PM, so we're going to add 12 to the hour. So 12 plus 5 is 17, 1740. And again, no AM or PM here. Now what if it was 5:40 in the morning, 5:40 AM? Well, this we're going to write 05 for our hour and 40 for the minute. Remember, four numbers, always four numbers in 24-hour time. And we don't need to put AM because our hour is less than 13. We know that we're in the morning. How about 9:50 p.m.? That's when class should be getting out. Well, 9:50 p.m., we'll add 9 to 12, and we should get 21, so 21:50. 9:50 a.m. on the other side of the clock would just be 09:50. How about 12 p.m., noon? What would that be? Well, that will simply be 12:00. You would pronounce this 1200. Okay, what about midnight? There are two different ways that we can write midnight in 24-hour time. One is 2400. The other is, and I think this one is a little more common, 0000, just 4 zeros, indicating that we've rolled over to an entirely new day. So then what would 1 p.m. be? Well, once we hit 1 p.m., we start adding 12 to our hours, so 1 p.m. is 1300. 1 a.m. would be 0100. And so on and so forth. So again, at p.m., after noon, we're going to add 12 to our hour. And you see here, there's no a.m. or p.m. in 24-hour time. We should have AM or PM in 12-hour time, and I will be looking to make sure that you include AM or PM when you're going from 24-hour to 12-hour time, because that's important. I need to know that you know what time of the day it is. Are we talking about 7 in the morning or 7 in the evening? Okay, moving on then to temperature. Let's talk a little bit about Celsius and Fahrenheit. So there are some basic numbers that you should know in Celsius and Fahrenheit. You should know these for the quiz. You should know these for your homework. You should know these just because they're good to know. And these are the freezing and the boiling point of water, and then of course your temperature. So freezing point for water in Celsius is 0 degrees. Freezing point for water in Fahrenheit is 32 degrees. So when you crank on the news and they say it's very cold at 0 degrees outside, we are significantly below freezing. Now, if you were to turn on the news in, I don't know, London, and they said that it was 0 degrees outside, that would mean we were right at freezing. The boiling point of water in Celsius is 100 degrees. Celsius is a lot more intuitive than Fahrenheit. Those make sense. Water freezes at 0 degrees, boils at 100 degrees. Boiling point for water in Fahrenheit is 212 degrees. And you'll see our numbers for Fahrenheit will always be higher than our numbers for Celsius, comparatively speaking. How about you? What temperature are you? Hopefully you know 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. In Celsius, you are 37 degrees, exactly 37 degrees Celsius. So again, I would work on committing like these 6 numbers right here to memory. If you can replicate this chart, you'll be good. Okay, let's look at how do we convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Here's our formula. You will be given this formula for your homework and for the quiz and for the final test. So you do not have to commit this to memory, though you can if you'd like. So to find Celsius, we take our temperature in Fahrenheit minus 32 degrees, and then we divide it by 1.8, and that will give us our temperature in Celsius. So right now it is 64 degrees in Denver, Colorado. Let's plug this into our formula and see what we get. So 64 minus 32 divided by 1.8. 64 minus 32 gives us 32. So now we have 32 divided by 1.8. And hopefully you remember your division with decimals. We cannot set up our problem like this, 32 divided by 1.8. Remember, we have to take that decimal, because we cannot divide by a decimal, and move them over to the right. And the same is true about the decimal on the inside back here behind our 32. He has to move over to the right as well, one time, so that we have a whole number out here and the same inside. So that will give us 18 into 320. Okay, now we can divide 320 divided by 18. Well, 18 will go into 32 once. And then 32 minus 18 will give us 14. Bring down our 0. 140 divided by 18 will be 7. And then 7 times 18 gives us 126. And when we subtract, we should get 14. So this is going to keep going. We can add a decimal and a 0 and bring it down, bring our decimal up into our answer. We're going to get 7 again. So it's 64 degrees right now in Denver, which means it is 17.7, little line over the top, degrees Celsius in Denver right now. Okay, how about somewhere else? How about Paris? That sounds lovely. Let's go to Paris. So 55 degrees Fahrenheit in Paris, but the Parisians don't use Fahrenheit, so let's convert it to Celsius. Otherwise they'll laugh at us. So we'll start with 55 minus 32, which should give us 23. 23 divided by 1.8. And then set up our division, 1.8 into 23. Make sure that you move your decimal, because we cannot divide by a decimal, to get 18 into 230. So now 230 divided by 18. 18 will go into 23 once. Subtract and get 5. Bring down your 0. 18 will go into 50 twice. It should give us 36. And then 50 minus 36 is 14. Add a decimal and a 0. Bring your decimal up. Bring your 0 down. I'm sorry, this is getting so cattywampus. 140 divided by 18. Again, we're going to have a repeating 7. Because 7 times 18 will give us 126. And that will subtract to 14 again. So repeating number there. So it's 55 degrees Fahrenheit in Paris, or 12.7 degrees Celsius. And in both of these, hopefully you understand what I mean by Celsius will always be less than Fahrenheit. If you woke up and I told you it's 55 degrees out, you'd probably say, oh, that sounds lovely. Or if I told you it's 12 degrees out, you'd probably say, oh, that sounds miserably cold. I don't want to scrape ice off of my car. But Celsius, by virtue of just the way it's set up, your temperature in Celsius will always be less than your temperature in Fahrenheit. Let's do one more example. Anchorage. Let's go up to Alaska. What temperature is it in Anchorage? So currently 58 degrees in Anchorage, Alaska. Let's do 58 minus 32 divided by 1.8. So we start with 58 minus 32, which is 26, divided by 1.8. Set up our division, 1.8 into 26. Move your decimal over to get 18 into 260. So 260 divided by 18. 18 will go into 26 once. We subtract and we should get 8. Bring down our 0. And then 80 divided by 18. 18 will go into that 4 times. 4 times 18 gives us 72. 80 minus 72 is 8. So we'll add our decimal and a 0, bring your 0 down. This is going to keep repeating as well. And you'll find that's true about a lot of our Celsius division. So 58 degrees Fahrenheit in Anchorage is the same as 14.4 degrees Celsius. A little 4 repeating forever. All right, let's look at another example of this. Let's look at going the other way, now from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So if you have your temperature in Celsius, we're going to run this problem exactly the opposite. So to go from Fahrenheit to Celsius, we divided. To go from Celsius to Fahrenheit, we're going to multiply. So if you have your temperature in Celsius, you will multiply it by 1.8 and then add 32. And that will give you your temperature in Fahrenheit. When I was working in Uganda, the easiest way that we found out to do this was to take your temperature in Celsius, multiply it by 2 and add 30, and that would give you a general ballpark idea of what your temperature was. So right now it is 34 degrees Celsius in Dubai. 34 degrees Fahrenheit sounds really cold, right? That's just above freezing. But 34 degrees Celsius we're going to see is quite the opposite. So 34 degrees Celsius in Dubai, let's plug that into our formula. So 34 times 1.8 plus 32. We'll start with our multiplication. 34 times 1.8. 8 times 4 is 32, carry your 3. 8 times 3 is 24, plus 3 is 27, and then add a 0. So we start our second row. 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 3 is 3. Add everything together, we should get 2. 7 plus 4 is 11, carry your 1. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 is 6. And then remember, our decimal moved over once here, no decimal on the top, so our decimal here is going to move over once as well. So 34 times 1.8 gives us 61.2. And then our next step is to add 32. Make sure that you're lining up everything properly based on its place value. 2 plus 0 is 2, 1 and 2 is 3, 6 and 3 is 9. So it's 34 degrees Celsius in Dubai, which means that it's currently 93.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Very toasty in Dubai. Let's do another example. Now let's go from Dubai, we'll go to Kampala. We'll go down and hang out in Uganda for a while. So it's currently 24 degrees Celsius in Kampala. So let's plug that into our formula. 24 times 1.8 plus 32. Start with your multiplication. 24 times 1.8. 4 times 8 is 32. Carry your 3. 8 times 2 is 16. 16 plus 3 is 19. Add a 0 because we're starting our second row. And then 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 2 is 2. And then add everything together. We should get 2. 9 and 4 is 13. Carry your 1. 1 and 1 is 2. Plus 2 is 4. And then our decimal moved over once here, so it's going to move over once here as well. So we should get 43.2 and then add 32 to get 2, 5, and 7. So it's 24 degrees Celsius in Kampala, which means it is 75.2 degrees Fahrenheit in Kampala. Should be very lovely weather. We'll go hang out in the gardens at the Serena Hotel. Okay, one more example. Last place. Let's go to Moscow. Now we're going very far north. Let's go hang out in Russia. So 27 degrees in Moscow. So we'll plug this into our formula. 27 times 1.8 plus 32. We'll start with our multiplication. 27 times 1.8. Let's see. 7 times 8 should give us 56. Carry your 5. 8 times 2 is 16. 16 plus 5 is 21. And then a 0 for our next row. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 2 is 2. and add. So 6 plus 0 is 6, 7 and 1 is 8, 2 and 2 is 4, and we had a decimal that moved over once, so our decimal is going to do the same. So we get 48.6. So now 48.6 plus 32, make sure you line up everything properly. 6 plus 0 is 6, 8 and 2 is 10, carry your 1, 4 and 1 is 5, plus 3 is 8. So 27 degrees in Moscow, or 80.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Also sounds very lovely, probably nice to hang out there as well. So that is our basics on going back and forth between 12 and 24-hour time, between Fahrenheit and Celsius. Like I said, you will be given the formulas when you're working on your homework, so you do not have to commit these to memory. Make sure when you're actually doing your homework that you're paying attention to lining up your numbers properly. With this guy right here, I see a lot of this when I see my students work. Don't do that. Add a decimal and a 0. Make sure that your numbers are lined up according to their place value. And as always, if you have questions or would like to double check anything, drop by office hours and we can talk.